Hey guys, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because for most anybody that it really matters to, it's probably old news, but I do want to show you what I'm doing. Somebody specifically asked about it. First thing you want to do is pull this tray up on there and turn it upside down. And then I use it to hold the screws as I pull them out. This is an old Nintendo that doesn't read games. You flip it over and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screw holes in it. You remove those 6 screws and la-ti-da, this comes off. And then there's 9 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 7 screws off and you pick this up. And this is what you got. And you may ask yourself, how do I know which screws came out of which hole? Well, they're all the same so far. This is where that changes. On this tray, there are 6 screws, 3 on each side. 1, 2, 3. But that one is silver on both sides. And that's the only one that differs. So you want to make sure that they're longer and they go in the front of those 2 holes on the black tray. See, it's real obvious. They're either the same or they're not the same. Just a little bit of finagling and this thing comes off of here once you get those 6 screws out. And then you find dead bugs inside of it. This can be a little bit tricky to pull out. You kind of just gotta wiggle it and not break it. So now you have this thing up and you can just push this metal shroud away from the bottom. You don't necessarily have to, and if you want to take it completely out, then you come over here and you start unplugging 1, 2, 3 cables from this board. So now you're left with just this board. And this is a Nintendo. This piece back here is called the pin connector, and it takes a little bit of force, but you literally can do it with one hand. Just kind of push. Maybe I won't do it with one hand. So it just removes that slot right there, takes this thing, and you can see how dirty those pins are. Well, it's equally as dirty inside here, and it's as dirty on the back side. So this bottom one is where your board, where your connector goes into your board, and then this top is where your game connects to the board. So it goes in here and down through those into the board. So I'm gonna use a little bit of alcohol and clean this thing up. Let's see how dirty this gets. So just wiping down both sides, this Q-tip, it got pretty gross. If you want the super advanced course, this chip right here, you can pull the 4th pin over. 1, 2, 3, 4. That right there, if you break that, you will never get the flashing light. That is what controls the flashing light, and you can pull that pin, break that wire. If you can do it all by itself, it's a little bit tricky, and then you will never, it's the security system override. So you break that and it never checks for your security system to play bootleg games and stuff, and it'll never give you the flashing screen or the flashing red light. But we're not doing that today because it's a pain in the butt and I don't know that it adds very much, but if you wanted to do it, you could. So next you want to make this little bitty hook out of a paper clip, because the next step, so when you put a cartridge game into the Nintendo, what you're doing is essentially this. You're making this chip slide into that hole. And what happens is these little connectors get pushed down every time, and eventually they don't quite spring back up correctly. And this has to be done with 2 hands just because of the nature of what it is. But we're going to take this little hook and we're going to get behind each of these and pull it out enough all the way across the board. So I got Levi cameramanning for me, and what you want to do is get back behind there and pick up each of those pins. Let me get my hand out of the way, enough to make it spring back into place. And it's a little tricky, and you got to go one at a time, but You're gonna pick each pin up. You can buy a replacement connector for like $7 or $8. And so some people will say it's not worth resetting each pin, but I will tell you the replacement pins are trash and they grab your game so hard you can't get it out of the console. And I would not buy one that I knew had a replacement pin connector in it. This is the better way to do it. So we're gonna reset each of these pins by pulling it up with our little hook we made. And I'm gonna do all of those and then we'll be back in a minute. Okay. So now we're done pulling up all of those pins individually. It's easier to go from this side and then work your way over instead of, I started over here because I haven't done one of these in a long time. So now we're just gonna go backwards and we're gonna put this back on here, just like that. And now we need to plug in all 3 of these cords over here. You'd be hard pressed to screw this up because the 2 that look kind of alike aren't close to each other and wouldn't really reach. And then there is a guide right there, so you have to get that green piece in there. And you just lay the whole thing in the right place, and there's guides here and here to show you that you've gotten it lined up correctly, and it'll just set down in place. Now this piece just slides right over here, and the next phase is something you can screw up. Remember, the lighter colored screws go in the front. This is the part that's the easiest to screw up. If you get this over tight, then the tray won't lock down the way it's supposed to. So you really just want it like a half turn past taunt. So it's like, okay, that is all the way down, and then you go like a quarter turn. And if you over tighten it, it won't stick down. But you won't know that until you get the lid back on. Here I over tighten it. It doesn't want to go down, and when it does go down, it doesn't stay down. So that has to do with these 2 screws in the front. They have to be the right temperature. Now you put this shroud back on. I will tell you that this shroud does nothing and you don't have to put it on, but it is part of the machine, so you should put it back on, but a lot of people skip this step. So you got your 9 screws back on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we can drop the top back in place and line it up. You got 6 screws left. You return them to the 6 holes, put this thing back on there, and it should just be ready to rock. Over tightening this front center one can also cause some issues. And there we go, all 6 screws are back in, and this thing, I'm putting it in backwards, is going back in place. We do not want to put dirty games in our new clean system, so we're going to open this thing up. If this were a 5-screw variant, we could use a small flat screwdriver. This one is not. You can pick these screwdrivers up on eBay for like $7 shipped. They are specialty tamper resistant screwdrivers for Nintendos. And on later consoles you use the big one. On NES games you use the smaller one. And you just stick it in there and unscrew it, but it's not a regular screw, so it's definitely, you have to have a specialty screw driver. Some people pretend you can do it with a piece of plastic that you melt and stick in there, but that is definitely not a good way to do it. With all 3 of these screws loose, then we can just kind of crack this bad boy open, and that's the inside of the cartridge. And this is the machine. This is the brains of the operation, and it is pretty dirty. And again, you just want to use isopropyl alcohol and clean this as best you can. I mean, some people would clean all of this board. This one doesn't look dirty, and it's really not necessary. So we're just going to clean the connectors on both sides. And this is how dirty one side of one Q-tip is. So it's worth using 2 or 3 Q-tips to do one side, and then 2 Q-tips to do the other side. And just make sure that you're ending up with a clean Q-tip. That way you know the board doesn't have anything else to deposit. Okay, easy as it can be. Now this goes back in here because it's clean. We don't see any other red flags. And then this can go right back on top. It's got the clips because it's a 3-screw. So this this has to go into those holes and then lay down like that. And then we'll just tighten these screws up. And here we go. We put the game in, push it back a little bit, slide it into place, press the button, and nothing happens. We get this red light. And we slide the game in, push it down, press power, and we get the flashing red light. There we go. It runs. These games are finicky, so sometimes you're gonna just get a not great read the first time. In case you were curious, this is what Mario 3 looks like on the inside. I'm gonna clean that one up. This has some tarnish on the brass. Some people might say to use Brasso. I would say it's better off the way that it is than using Brasso and cutting down on what little bit of Brasso takes off of the top layer of brass. And this brass ain't very thick. So that was Mario 3. We'll throw it in. You press go, and away we go. But there's one more piece. This controller is real sticky. You want to see what the inside of a gross Nintendo controller looks like? Takes little tiny Phillips screws. Same process, just 6 screws pulling out. These are little Phillips head screws. So you loosen up those 6 screws and this comes off of here, and then there's a couple more screws, I think. Maybe not. You have to unwind that wire and then it just goes in through here. So in here is this is up, down, left, right, select, start, B, A. And those are metal contacts right there. And then when you press down the button, it pushes this metal contact into that metal contact and completes the circuit for that lead, and then it runs it into the chip so it knows what you've selected. So what you need to wipe down is all of these contacts for all of the buttons, and then all of these little metal contacts for the buttons. Just rub them with isopropyl alcohol. And these are little pieces of rubber, and then under there is your actual button. So if you're having problems like this one with the button sticking, you can see it almost looks like somebody spilled soda in here. So we'll pull the button up. And we can wipe that wipe that out and wipe this off. And we'll do that with all the buttons, and this controller will be as good as new as too. So these are cleaned up, and you could really go the extra mile and clean all this up, but nobody's ever going to see it, so I don't know that it matters, and it doesn't affect. So these are going to push up a little easier, and then we're just going to clean these points of contact. It's easier to do with 2 hands. So this is a little delicate to put back together, but I'm just going to put it back together the same way it came apart. And we got the controller back together, and would you look at that? It's like we're playing with a whole new machine. Thanks for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, following, clicking the bell, all the things that you do. This isn't our typical video, but it does pertain to reselling. Evelyn, tell them what to do.